over just some concepts about factoring that I had posted about last week, just to kind of, review some of the stuff and make sure that we're comfortable with it. So the first type of factoring I'm going to go over is GCF factoring. Okay, and bear with me because I'm learning how to write on this thing on my iPad. Okay, so GCF stands for greatest common factor. So let's first just talk about finding the greatest common factor of two numbers. So let's say that I wanted to find the GCF of 8 and 36. Okay, so what we would do first is we're going to list our factors of 8, which are, and factors meaning the numbers that multiply to make 8. So that's 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Okay. Now I'm going to list my factors of 36. So 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. Okay. So looking right now at our two lists, we can see that the greatest common factor, the largest number that I'm seeing in both lists, is 4. Okay, so the GCF between 8 and 36 is 4. Okay. Now, I sent everybody a link on Google Classroom to an online graphing calculator, and also to another online graphing calculator, which is through the TI company, what you guys use in school. So if you don't know, if you're having trouble getting the factors of the numbers, just like off the top of your head, what you can do is hit the Y equals button, and then in the Y1, so let's say you wanted the factors of 36, you're going to type in 36 divided by X. And then you're going to hit second graph so that you're in the table. And then starting at X equals 1 and going up, you're going to list all of the whole numbers, all the integers, okay? You don't want to list anything with a decimal. Don't list any negative numbers, okay? Just the numbers that are, are nice integers. Once you get to a point where the numbers start repeating, like they flip, like after 6 and 6, the next one would be 9 and 4. So you would stop there because that's a repeat of 4 and 9. So you wouldn't even include that in your list. So that's a way to do this using the calculator that can help you get the factors, okay? Now, the other thing that we need to think about is when we want to find the GCF of two variables, okay? So let's say, okay. Oh, still figuring this out. Hang on. That is not what I want to do. Okay, all right. So let's take a look at the idea of finding the GCF when we're dealing with variables. So let's say I've got x to the third power and x to the fifth power. Now the GCF, if you think about what x cubed actually means, so x cubed is equal to x times x times x, right? Now x to the fifth is equal to x times x times x times x times x, okay? Now if we think about what these two terms have in common, what these two monomials have in common, let me just change my color here, something different. Okay, so they've got this pair of x's in common, this pair of x's in common, and this pair of x's in common, okay? So they have there's three x's that the two monomials have in common. So your GCF is going to be x cubed, okay? Now, the way you can remember this is that whenever you have a problem where you're dealing with variables, the GCF is always going to be the lowest exponent. So let me just erase this a little bit. Clearly I'm not erasing correctly. Hang on one second. Okay. So let's just say we have y to the y squared and y to the 10th. The GCF, you don't even need to do anything. The GCF is just going to be y squared. The GCF, when you're talking about variables, is always just going to be the lowest exponent, okay? Now, sometimes what's going to happen is you're going to have a problem that's going to be dealing with numbers and with variables in them, okay? And you're going to have to figure out what you do in that scenario. And if I could figure out how to write on this, that would be great. Okay, here we go. So let's say we've got, so let's suppose we have 4x and 8x, okay? And we want to find the GCF. So you're going to take, 4x, let's make that 8x squared. So the first thing is I'm going to draw on my invisible 1 for my exponent here. Now, the first thing you want to think about is let's get just the GCF of the numbers. Let's just focus on that right now. So if we want to find the GCF of 4 and 8, so let's list our factors of 4. So that's 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Oh my God. Okay, hold on one second. Still learning how to write on this. Okay, so that's supposed to be a 2. Okay, now our factors of 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Okay, so the largest number that both lists have is 4. So the beginning of our GCF is 4. Okay, so the GCF is equal right now to 4. Okay, so now let's focus on the variables. So we've got x to the first and x squared. So again, just take the lowest exponent. So our lowest exponent between these two is x to the first. So your GCF is just 4x to the first. Okay, that's your GCF. All right. So that's pretty much how to find the GCF. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over problems where we're going to actually be factoring using GCF. And let me figure out how to turn the page. Hang on one second. This is not working. And give me one moment. Okay. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So now let's actually do some practice with factoring using GCF. So for our first example, and this is actually from the worksheet that I posted last week. So let's say we have the problem hang on. Okay. So let's say we've got the problem for x plus 16, and we want to factor this. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out, okay, what's our GCF of 4 and 16? So my factors of 4 are 1 and 4, 2 and 2, okay? My factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Okay, so now if we look at our lists, we can see that the largest number that both lists have is 4. Okay, so that's the beginning of our GCF. Okay, now the next piece is you would think about your variables. So now, looking at the original problem, only the 4x has the variable x. The 16 doesn't have anything. So what that means is that there's actually not going to be, there's no variable as part of the GCF. The GCF is just 4, because GCF stands for greatest common factor. If they both don't have an x, that can't be a common factor. So the GCF is just 4. So that's our first step when we're trying to factor, okay? Now our second step is we need to pull out the GCF from our original problem. So what I mean by that is we're going to divide it out, okay? So now what I'm going to do is take my original problem, the 4 x plus 16, and we're going to divide each piece by our GCF, which is, in this case, 4, okay? So when we do that, we are left with x plus, and then 16 divided by 4 is just 4, okay? So now we have what we get when we divide out the GCF. So our final answer then is just to take this and stick the GCF right on the outside of it. So our final answer is 4 parentheses x plus 4. Okay, that's your answer. You just factored using GCF. Okay, not too bad, right? Okay, so let's do another example that now is going to involve a little bit more going on with the variables. So why don't we try? I'm picking ones again from the worksheet that that I had posted last week. So why don't we do this one? Pick a good one. Hang on. Let me pick a good one. All right, so let's go to the next page. So let's do this one. We've got 8 y to the 9th minus 2y to the 4th. Okay, so again, first step, let's find our GCF. Let's first just focus on our numbers. So I'm going to list my factors of 8, which are 1 and 8, and 2 and 4. Now I'm going to list my factors of 2, which are just 1 and 2. So the largest number that both of my lists of factors have is 2. Okay, so the beginning part of my GCF is 2. Okay, so that was the part with the numbers. So now we're going to look at the parts with the variables. So we've got y to the 9th and y to the 4th. Okay, so again, just take whoever is the lowest exponent. So the lowest exponent in this case is y to the 4th. So 2y to the 4th. So that is our GCF. Okay, so you've gotten halfway through the problem. Okay, all right, so now the second step is we are going to now divide our original problem, which is this guy here, by our GCF. So we've got 8y to the 9th minus 2y to the 4th, and we're going to divide both pieces by 2y to the 4th, okay? So when we do that, so 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now, this is a little bit of a review. When you're dividing variables, you want to subtract your exponents, okay? So y to the 9th divided by y to the 4th, you're just doing 9 minus 4, which is 5, okay? So that's the first part, minus. Now 2 divided by 2 just gives you 1. And then here we've got y to the 4th over y to the 4th. So what you're going to do when you have a situation like this where both variables, top and bottom, have the same exponent, they just reduce to 1, or what sometimes what us math teachers like to say is that they cancel out. So you can kind of forget about these guys. They just reduce to 1, okay? So this whole section here just simplifies to 1, okay? So now, final answer is just going to be 2y to the 4th times 4y to the 5th minus 1. So what you got when you divided, and then the GCF goes on the outside. Boom, that's your answer. Okay? All right, awesome. So let's do another example, okay? Because this is so much fun. I know you guys love it. Again, all of these answer keys are on Google Classroom, and I'm going to keep posting this stuff for you guys. And I'll, periodically be making videos. Okay, so let's do one like this. All right. So let's say we've got this 6y squared, and then plus 11y to the 5th. Okay. So now here, let's look at our 6 and our 11. So our factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Our factors of 11 are 1 and 11. And that's it for 11 because 11 is a prime number. So the largest number that both lists have in common is 1. That's going to happen sometimes. That's okay. So the beginning of our GCF is just 1. Okay. So now we're going to look at the y squared and the y to the 5th. Okay. So again, just look for your lowest exponent, which in this case is going to be y squared. So this is it. This is your GCF. Okay, 1y squared, all right? Okay, now the next step, we're going to divide it out. So we've got 6y squared plus 11y to the 5th, our original problem, and we're dividing it by our GCF, which is 1y squared, okay? So 6 divided by 1 is just 6. And then the y squared over y squared, remember what we said on the last one, that is just going to simplify to 1, or sometimes we say cancel out. Okay, so we're just left with 6 for the first part. Now for the second part, so 11 divided by 1 is 11. Y to the 5th over y squared. Now, remember, we're going to subtract those exponents. Okay, so 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, so our final answer is just taking this guy and putting this guy on the outside of it. So we have, now you don't need to write the 1, you can write 1y squared. I'm just going to write y squared, it's the same thing, parentheses, and then in parentheses you're going to put this, 6 plus 11y cubed. And this is your final answer. And I'm trying to circle it. There we go. Okay. All right. So this pretty much goes over GCF. Now you've got day 1 and day 2 of what I posted last week are all of your worksheets from GCF. Now day 3 and day 4, I posted difference of two perfect squares and trinomials. So I'm going to be making videos for those as well and posting them on Google Classroom. And hopefully this will be helpful to you. If you haven't completed the assignment from last week, the factoring assignment, please do that. Just because we're going to continue with factoring, so it's really important that you feel comfortable with it now. So I will speak to you guys later. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.